Hello and welcome to Gen Friends. I'm Cheri Passy from Carolina Girl Genealogy, and we are here today to talk about Who Do You Think You Are? And tonight, with my on the panel is Terry O'Connell, the Executive Director of the In-Depth Genealogist. Hi, Terry.
Hey, Cheri, how are you?
I'm good. I'm already flubbing up, so y'all keep me in mind.
It's all good.
We've got Melissa Barker, our archive lady. We're so glad she's here with us tonight. Hi,
Hello,
Melissa.
hello. How are you guys doing?
It's so good to have you back on the panel. We're so glad to have you back.
Glad to be back.
And then we've got Mary Kircher-Roddy from MKR Genealogy. Hi, Mary.
Hi there. Great to
So
be
good
here.
to have you tonight. It's always good to see you. It's always so good. So we're going to talk about two of the episodes tonight. We're going to talk about the Laverne Cox episode, and we're going to talk about the Megan Mullally episode. And we're going to get started first with Laverne Cox. She wanted to find out about her mom's line. And so she's African American, and we all know that that can get tough. They found her ancestor in the 1870 census. And then, it's hard to get back. And there was different names that she had known him by too. And in this particular time frame, he was known as a Matthews. So they found him as a Matthews in the 1870 census. And so with African American research, they didn't always take the name of their slave owner, but that's at least a step and a place to look. So they had to go and start looking at the slave schedules, and they did find someone who owned slaves who lived in that area with a Matthews name. Does anybody want to take it from there? No,
I was just gonna say I really love the enthusiasm that so far this season that they've all had. It's always great to see people who, I don't know, have never done genealogy, and as they're presented with this information and then they add to it, they actually genuinely, at least I think they are genuinely excited and want to go to that next step and excited, and they're interested,
right,
learning.
And they're also showing them on the computer. They're saying, you do this, you type this in, let's see what comes up. And then they're explaining to them what the records are and then what these records mean. And I liked it when they pulled up the slave schedule, the 1860 slave schedule. They explained that, yes, there is somebody there, his age. That doesn't mean it's him, but at least we've got a clue that this person had an enslaved person fitting the description, and so let's look and see what other records we can find. And I think sometimes that's a missing piece, and people think that all they have to do is go look at those slave schedules and, oh, that's the same last name, and look, they had a 12-year-old girl and my ancestor was a 12-year-old girl, so therefore that's my ancestor. And it doesn't work that way. It's just another piece of the puzzle, and you just have to keep looking. And they started looking in the records of the Matthews family. And that is where they actually found some information. The person that had the slaves at that time period was actually a woman, which was interesting. So she must have, her name was Victoria, so she must have inherited from her husband, or it could have been her father. They could have been hers from her father. And so as they went through her will and the probate, they found a name very similar to her ancestor's name. And so once again, and she said, is that the right name? Because it's a little different,
I like the fact that they're showing these name differences in these records, because how all of us on this panel and anyone that's listening knows that we run into this almost every time we research an ancestor, whether it's, from someone who's recording the information, they write it how it sounds, or it just gets, swapped around. And, because I just don't think it was as important to make sure your name was spelled as correctly as it is today.
So true, so true. And I know all of us have been there when we started out. We didn't know better. that we would say, oh, that's not my ancestor. Or we would flip through it, have you flip through the index in the back and only checked the spelling that you knew.
Oh, yes. Been there.
I know. We all have. And so I like that they're explaining those things. And I like that they're letting them think on what's going on and come up with some questions. Some of them are coming up with some pretty good questions about why is this happening? You know, what's going on here? So
in this episode, I like that they not only was Laverne interested in her biological family, but she followed that second husband's line to find out more about her ancestor. Because it's really important that we do, you know, everybody's like, it's not my blood, I don't want to, but you have to find more about your person. So it was really cool to see her follow up with that full story on the second husband.
Are you talking about the Megan Mullally one?
No, it didn't.
I just, for some reason, it's not clicking that there was a second husband, but maybe there was.
Maybe
I believe you.
Confusing them.
It's okay.
It's okay.
It's all good. It's all good. But your point
I thought
is
she
correct.
did do that.
Yeah, maybe she did. I'm just not remembering. But your point is absolutely right, because so many times I know a lot of people that just want, you know, they're just researching, you know, just their line. They don't want to research anything else, and they're missing out on so much information, because a lot of times those collateral lines, those other family members, that's where the stories are. That's where you get information on your family. So we can't neglect them. We have to research all of it.
Absolutely.
Well, and to understand kind of the culture that, I don't know anybody now that doesn't know their birth date, but people didn't know when they were born, and often they had no idea. And it wasn't something that was even necessarily celebrated a birthday. So you might not even know it's in January.
Exactly.
So, much less the year. And then when enslaved peoples, they were not allowed to learn to read. And so, in general. And so, who could be expected to know how to spell their name, much less whether it was spelled right or wrong?
Yes. Well, she found out some wonderful information, too, about this ancestor of hers. He was gifted land from the woman who had enslaved him. Now, it didn't say that he owned the land, but he was given the land for as long as he would work the land. And then they found records where they found some probate records and some other records that showed that he had actually gone to a bank and gotten loans. So he was trusted enough in the community to go get loans, and then he ended up in the 1870 census. He owned land. They also found voter registration for him. So he had registered to vote. And I think one of the most touching things from this episode was the place where he went to register. The building isn't there anymore. It's an archaeological site now. And so they were able to go and stand on that property where he had stood to register to vote. And that it always gives me chills when they stand where their people stood. Always gives me chills. I always think that's just fabulous. So I think she learned a lot. They only really talked about the one ancestor, but I think it was important, the things that she learned, and that he was able to pull himself out of that, after the war, and be able to become a landowner, to be able to register to vote, to be able to be somebody in the community that people looked up to, I think was a wonderful thing for her to be able to find.
I'm always excited when they have an African American research project, because I want so badly for it to encourage other people doing African American research that there's hope for finding your ancestors. Because
Exactly.
I think for a long time they've been told, when you get past a certain time, you might as well forget it because you just know records. But you know what? There's always more records. As an archivist, speaking as an archivist, there's always more records being discovered. There's always, and I say discovered, and they're not really discovered, but they're just found, or they're, discovered sitting on a shelf or whatever. they come to light. The archivist, brings them off the shelf, maybe it gets them digitized, and then they really come, to the forefront. So I'm always so excited when they have an African American project.
And showing those steps, perhaps they took that name. Check their, start there. That's at least a starting place. And then if you can't find anything, go from there. Look at the Freedmen Bureau records. Those are fabulous to be able to connect, especially after the war, because they would have those labor contracts. And and they would actually, because I've been able to find some of those for people. They actually would have the name of the person they were working for, and then they would have these lists of names. And so if the name is consistent and you could recognize your ancestor in that list, that's a wonderful tie to then, okay, they were working here. At least you know where they were at that time frame. And there's a possibility that the person that they're working for at that time was the former slave owner. So there are ways, like you said, Melissa, there are ways to get that done. So does anybody have any other comments that they want to make for Laverne's story? Or should we move on to Megan?
I think I'm good.
So, okay, sounds like we need to move on to Megan. Megan's had a lot of newspapers. Boy,
Yes,
most of their
I loved
information
it.
came from
I love newspapers.
And she wanted to find out more about her father. And her father was not the nicest person. He was an alcoholic and he was abusive. And then so was her grandfather, she was saying. And she was saying, what I want to find is, she goes, I know that there's a lot of dark and there's probably a lot more dark. It's so sad. She was hoping to find something good, but she just, But
I think she did in the end. So even though I flubbed the stories.
No, it's fine.
She followed.
I do that all the time.
She did follow the whatever generation grandmother and in the second line, and she found perseverance.
Yes, she did.
Yes,
she did. She found perseverance.
She survived. She raised her children. And I think Megan also, though she didn't say it, she found answers to the questions of why.
Yes.
Why is my father like this? Why is this, the way my family is?
Because it was all the way back to her great-great-grandfather was abusive. He was in the newspaper. He went to jail for beating his wife. And he was out on the street. Was it the second husband that was out on the street with the ball and chain, or was it the first husband? Was it the second husband too? I mean, she could pick him, couldn't she? But here's the thing though. Back in that time period, like they were saying, a woman couldn't report it. Somebody else would have, probably some man had to report it. And women were just property of their husbands. And so in a lot of states, it wasn't even illegal to beat your wife. But I guess, depending on the severity, it could cross the line to where you would go to jail. So I like the story too, that he was conscripted into the Confederate Army, and then they were able to find some paperwork for him that they went to the National Archives and found his box, and in the box with his paperwork it said that he had been arrested because they claimed that he was an abolitionist. And so I don't know how she did this, because they were in Macon, Georgia. They'd taken him to Philadelphia, Richmond. They'd taken him to Richmond, and she made it 500 miles from Macon, Georgia to Richmond, Virginia. And I'm thinking, they said she was a dressmaker. Maybe the husband had money at that time. How on earth did she get? I guess she just jumped on whatever was going that way. and then where did she leave her kids? I'm thinking all this stuff.
Same thing.
Well,
maybe grandparents or aunts and uncles were around.
And some of the pieces I did research the episode afterwards, because I was curious.
You did tell us about that. Yes.
Well, I immediately I watch it generally recorded, so I immediately, as soon as they talked about her grandfather and his suicide, found his death certificate in Los Angeles. they focused on a story in this and kind of a theme, and it was about the abuse. And this had been a cycle in several generations of her family, including, you know, her own father. She did not go that way. She found men who a husband who has respected her and has kind of turned the cycle around. And so they focused on this story. There were a lot of other stories they could have told.
That's true. This is true.
I don't have the records right now with me, and I apologize, but I do remember that. I think so. Megan's great grandmother, the one with the two great grandmother, the one with the two husbands, did have some family money. She was left money by her father in his probate, so maybe she did have some money to be able to make some choices.
Oh, that's good to know. Okay. You know, I was really struck by the newspaper article that they found about the grandfather's suicide, because, you know, she'd heard that story, but just to look on her face reading the account in the newspaper, it just brought it.
Well, how many of us have done that? How many of us have done that? Heard a family story, and then as a genealogist, we found the document, the newspaper, the death certificate, whatever it is that confirmed it, and you were like, "Oh, it's true."
Yeah. Or it's not true.
It's not true. That's right.
Which is usually the case, right? But yeah, you could just see how that affected her. And then she was just rooting for this great grandmother. I found somebody who has integrity, and she fought for her husband. And then there was a newspaper article where she got in trouble for beating him.
Yes.
But I liked what the historian said to her. You know, there's a very good chance that she was defending herself. I liked that.
Yeah.
And so she was happy. You know, she found this good, you know, piece of information. She was happy, and then went back to sad again because she found out that her great-great-grandmother was put in a mental institution. And so she was able to travel to the hospital still there, and she was able to get records, and the records showed that she was 60 years old at the time she was admitted, and that the condition was called lunacy. And they said that she had memory lapses and that she was violent. And I thought to myself, those are signs of early Alzheimer's.
Yes, that's actually what I thought too.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's what was going on with her. But the other point too, I mean, you know, you can speculate, but she had been in an argument with her children, with her sons from her first marriage, about land, them not wanting it to go to the children of her second marriage. And so Megan was speculating, well, maybe they had her, you know, committed because they didn't want to fight about this land anymore. But I think she had won the battle for the land before that happened. So maybe the battle just did her in. Maybe the fighting with her children just sent her over the edge. But yeah, sometimes, you know, I watch some of that as they're speculating. I'm thinking, yeah, but we don't really know what caused that. Was it that? You know, I don't know. But, you know, so she did find a hero, so to speak, in the end, somebody who, you know, took care of her children and did the best she could with the circumstances. And that's what all of our ancestors do. Mm-hmm. They do the best with the circumstances and the times that they live in, and the knowledge that they have. You know, they do the best that they can. They're just human beings, you know. Mm-hmm. So, yeah.
I just want to add, I was very sad we didn't go to Ireland.
Oh, I know you would think with Mullally.
I was going to Ireland tonight.
It was your show, and then they didn't go. She didn't really go. She went to the National Archives. That's, you know. That's cool.
I don't think either one of those went overseas at all.
No, they didn't.
I didn't think so.
No, they stayed right here. So, but you know, I think both episodes showed some good tips and research, ways to research. I really, like I said, I like the fact that they're having them type in the names. And is that the right name? It doesn't matter. It's close enough, and names spelling doesn't count in genealogy, and it's okay. And to look at the record, I've noticed instead of in the past, it would be like they zoom right down to where the information was in the census, and it seems like they're going, okay, this is this county, this year. It's almost more of a step by step, and then scroll down, and there they are, and this is the age, and so it's almost like they're showing you got to read these documents. You can't just find your person's name and go, okay, that's all I needed. They were there in 1870. Then let's go find them someplace else. So
I also like that they're explaining the stuff that we would question, like the names. So what's making you say that? Well, we have confirmed this with other records. We might not show records, but we are confirming it. So. Yeah.
Absolutely, that they have other records, and also I can't remember which one of the two episodes, but they were talking about DNA, and they were saying that the DNA has to go hand in hand with the paper trail. And I was like, yay! I was very, very happy that they made that clear, because it's so true. DNA isn't going to tell you who your ancestor is.
Right.
It's just you have to have the paper trail. So I'm liking how they're kind of leading them along instead of just saying, here's this, having them be a part of it. I mean, we all know that they've already found all that beforehand, but that's good. I mean, at least they know that there's going to be story. They have to do that. They can't just live film it.
Right, exactly.
They couldn't find anything. Then it'd be our lives, right? I mean, true stories of a genealogist. Maybe we should pitch that show.
Well, I always laugh when they have them type in their ancestors' names, and that that's not the way it is. That the indexer transcribed it some entirely different way. But they can type in the name because somebody's come in and made alternate spellings, so it will pick it up.
It'll pick it up, yeah. And they're showing them how to go to the catalog. A couple of times they've gone to the catalog instead of straight in, and so I just love when they're teaching these teaching moments, because so many people, well, a majority of people, I would assume, that watch the show, maybe they've never even tried to research their family. They're just enjoying the show and wishing one day that they could do that. I don't know how many people who actually are genealogists or have even tried to research their tree watch. And so I like that they are giving more hints and saying those types of things, like, this is just because this person is on this list the same age doesn't make it your ancestor.
Yeah.
That's very, very important, because you have people that think you can, because that's what they did on Who Do You Think You Are. So anyway, I think there were two good shows, and I really, like I said, appreciated the teaching tips that they did, and I always like their desire to want to know more, and their thinking processes, and they're asking questions, and it's all about the questions, right? It's all about the question and getting the questions answered. So that's been really fun to watch. Does anybody else have anything else they want to say about these two episodes? I think we're good. Well, I hope that if you were able to watch these two episodes of Who Do You Think You Are, you were able to enjoy them. And if you missed some of the tips or you haven't watched it, go back and watch them again and look for the things that we talked about and see if some of those things can help you in your research and make your journey a little bit easier, because you are learning correct principles on how to do your genealogy. We will see you next time on Gen Friends. Bye, everybody.
Bye.